Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are listening in. This is the second episode of the taxi specific podcast under the channel The Football Uncensored Podcast. Um, I'm Joe Mealy. I run a taxi operation in Northwest London. And I'm here today with none other than John Sitton, who, as everyone no doubt knows, who tunes into the usual football chat on a Saturday, uh, ex-professional footballer, professional manager, and now a green badge London taxi driver. John, you okay? All well?
Yeah, all good, Joe. Yeah, no complaints. Yeah.
Other than the fact that the trade's on its arse, there's a COVID pandemic that's don't look like it's going to end.
Yeah, he done us like a kip with Boris. He opened his mouth. I'm at the stage now where I think it's there's a veiled agenda. I think it's being used for other reasons now. I don't doubt that people have fallen ill, but obviously I'm asking round, and I'm yet to come across anyone who knows someone who's had it. And the figures thrown out are negligible. I think what they're concerned with is the spread of it. But that would have been all right if everyone had played the game in the first place. I was one of the ones that did. So inevitably, it's like a microcosm of life or my life. From like when you start knocking about and putting yourself about around town. So from the age of 12, going over to the Arsenal to train, and then you start to grow up a little bit. You just think yourself, you get nowhere by being a straight goer. I played the game and I've come unstuck because there's people who ain't played the game, and then that's led to this continuum is the word
Mm, mm,
of this so-called epidemic. Whereas the gaff where it started, they're back to normal. Their life's going on as normal. They're getting on with life, and then other bits and pieces around. They're doing it right. Germany, Sweden, they've trusted the populace, and they don't seem to have had too much of a problem with it. I don't know.
I- I'm going to throw a challenge to you then, John.
Yeah, go
We,
on.
we, we, we know the issue. We know the issues. Obviously, we've discussed it before, and I know you've discussed them elsewhere, specifically on Twitter, which obviously you're very active on.
Issues
We,
regarding what?
issues regarding the taxi trade, COVID
Yeah,
19, the
yeah,
mismanagement of COVID 19.
yeah.
Um, you know,
Valid
everything.
agendas all over. It's valid
Yeah,
agendas all over.
yeah,
Do you
and
know what I mean? Yeah.
and it's
TFL, the
yeah,
mayor,
you name it, it's there, right?
they're all involved. They're all involved.
So we know that it's very. It seems like you say, if there is an agenda, if there is forces at play that would like to see something like the taxi trade cease to exist, want to dumb it down, knowing that, and knowing that it's so difficult to corral the trade to fight back and to get an ally that's big enough and ugly enough to be able to match some of these behemoths that are at play. Are there any, and I know we touched on this in the last episode, but are there any, opportunities for the trade now and beyond that can be utilized to basically make things a little bit easier for London cab drivers? And I'll throw one out there. COVID-19 has decimated the trade. There's thousands of vehicles off the road now, and the
Mm.
ones that are on the road aren't earning, and if they are earning, they're stuck in traffic because of the road closures. Is there could COVID-19, given that the London cab trade, as we spoke about before, premium service, Black Cab is the most iconic taxi brand in the world. You got the screen. Is if or is there the potential for COVID-19 to be used as a way to get Londoners moving around town more safely because London cabs can get them there safely? Could it be leveraged, is what I'm asking you.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, but it hasn't been. Let me pick you up on a couple of things. First thing is when you said earlier in the longest question in Christendom, you said about trying to.
I've got to get a word in sometime, John.
Yeah, no, fair enough. You know what I mean? But it's it defeats the purpose of me having a rant. If you know what I mean, I've got to lay it all out on the table for everyone, because like the bottom
I
line
know,
is, you
I know.
said about attempting to or trying to kill off the black cab trade. Basically they've been um, doing it for, I'd say, well over a decade now. Well over a decade, and I'm still struggling to meet someone, find someone, talk to someone who can have a reasonable, rational conversation and give me the reasons why. Because what you've left out of the second part is like you've got a fully wheelchair accessible vehicle. You've got a fully trained topographical knowledge of London driver who's fully insured, who's had his full medical checks and a full disclosure, what used to be the Criminal Records Bureau disclosure form, etc., etc. As opposed to the other mob, who slowly but surely they're coming unstuck, which I'm sure we'll come to, especially in light of the recent judgments in court. And yet somehow we still seem to be, and I've been going to work, and people are still, especially young birds. I mean, I just don't get these, like the young women who are still jumping in with them. You know what I mean? I don't mean that disparaging. I just come from a different era. You know what I mean, Joe? I mean, I was 61 last Wednesday. So I don't mean it disrespect. I just say like a young woman, a young lady, young bird. You know what I mean?
But
It
there's
means the
safety
same thing.
issues. There's huge
Yeah.
safety issues.
And they're still jumping in with an Uber
Yeah.
after a night out. You know what I mean? But you've got this ongoing situation where Uber have been back to the tune of like multi-billion-dollar losses year after year after year. And then like in this country, I'm sure that there's a lot of others that come to light, which I retweeted at the time with regards to attacks in the Middle East. You had the British girl, I think somewhere, it might have been Libya, where she was dragged off and raped and killed. I think he beat her to death or strangled. Anyway, it's a dark subject, but the bottom line being, they're still somehow managed to keep a foothold in this once great metropolis known as London. So it can't. There's no way it could have been done without corruption and collusion.
So okay, yeah. I mean, I think the way it seems to me, this is my point of view, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong, which I'm sure you will. The cab trade, because it's fragmented, and I think all taxi trades across the globe, because by nature of taxis versus a private car, private hire, whatever you want to call it, by nature of them not being reliant on an operator, are fragmented and independent and individual. It's divide and rule. And
That's how it's always, Joe. That's how it's always been. Even when they stick together, even when with a cab driver, or in this case, two cab drivers, I'm led to believe, come up with a great idea, and they call it Halo, then that sells out to My Taxi, which sells out to Free now, or they change the name. And then you could go back through history. Anything where they smell a pound note, and there's like a PLC or a trust involved or a company involved. I mean, I don't know if I'm talking out of turn, but inevitably it dissolves, or you end up like people climbing over each other to get to the top. You know, I mean, we once ruled the thing. People think Uber's a new phenomenon. The black cab trade have been doing for well over 60 years what Uber has supposedly been praised for in terms of like having a credit facility, pre-booked, credit card facility on point, right? And calls being made or calls put through with regards to dispatching drivers to the point of pickup, right? So you've had Comcab, radio taxis, and dialer cab. Well, you know, it's just like a new idea that's come from Silicon Valley, and we've got like now we're in the midst of a multi-billion-dollar losing. Non-tax-paying US sexual assault, US corporation sexual assault and rape app, without going into the statistics again and again and again and again. But it's up knocking on the door of 300. Then you've got the last thing with Transport Office Command Unit, which they think they was doing London a favour. They went from 22 officers to 66, and they went, oh, we've got 3 times the officers. Well, London, depending on what article you read or what map you read, is between 600 and it's either 606, 612 or 660 square miles. It's like someone's dropped a blancmange and it's gone and spread out. You know what I mean? And they think 66 officers are enough. That's when you see it. Yeah. But when the last time they spun them over, they found drugs, they found weapons, they found people with swapped identities, blah, blah, blah. So what are they still doing? Not only that, they're illegally applying for hire. Here's a thing, right? Just to take it slightly off at a tangent. Here's a thing. I've been driving around now for 18 years, and I can honestly say, right, this is the first time, the last couple of years, that I've noticed the fact that there are fewer and fewer and fewer what we used to call traffic wardens. They call them something now, marshals, I don't know. Traffic enforcement or enforcement marshal. They're depending on the local authority, they've got different
assistant referee.
Yeah, well, depending on what's who the local authority is, they've got the eye visibility thing, and then they've got a different title on the back. The bottom line is, I'll call them a traffic warden, right? Well, why is that? Who pulled them off the streets? Who made the redundant? Who said you're not needed? Was it TfL? Well, if it was TfL, why did you do it? If it's a local authority, why did you do it? I'll tell you why they've done it. Is so minicabs can sit there and illegally apply for hire on a double red route or a double yellow line, which is no parking, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? Waiting for the ping. So hence they're illegally applying for hire. But picking you up on the thing, what can we do? Someone in the house, right at the start of COVID, said that the black cab trade was on standby for the NHS.
Yeah.
All right. Not a metered fare, a set fare.
Yeah.
Right. Whereby drivers could have been sent with a wheelchair accessible vehicle, with a driver who's been fully trained on how to alight the passenger and make sure they're strapped in properly with regards to seatbelts, etc. We never got the call, did we? We never got the call.
No, and that brings me actually on to the question I was going to ask next is, you know, these forces at play, whether it be TfL, whether it be central government, Department for Transport, whatever,
or all of the above.
Or all of the above. To me, don't see taxis as part of the solution. They see them as the problem. And the policies they've implemented suggests that's what they think. And yet, Uber sell themselves. The reason why I think they got so much investment, you got the driverless thing, which was we discussed off air.
That's a nonsense.
It's a nonsense. It's an
insult. Listen, if you're a UK taxpayer, everything that's gone on countrywide, every city, I've got cabbies correspond with me on social media. Edinburgh, Glasgow, Manchester, Birmingham, Belfast, right? Liverpool, all over the gaff. It's an insult to your intelligence as a UK taxpayer, especially the money that's been wasted by TfL. I watched the debate yesterday, 10 o'clock in the morning, between Meg Hillier, Labour MP for Hackney and Shoreditch, talking to Susan Hall, right, who's part of the Greater London Assembly.
Yeah.
Right? Well, she's come to the table, right, this Hillier. How do these people get in power? And all this, and all she kept saying at the start of every sentence, let me be clear. Let me be clear. Let me be clear. Listen, darling, if you want to be clear, come to the table, right? Come to the debate armed with the statistics that you need to be armed with, right? Because she's going on about the amount of debt that Boris incurred, and the fact that, which is a complete nonsense in itself, Sadiq Khan, in inverted commas, I'm paraphrasing slightly, is looking out for London. So how's he looking out for London? As when in collusion with local authorities, you can't get anywhere. They're closing all the back streets, right? In inverted commas, LTN, low traffic neighbourhood, that stands for, right? Spending £1 billion on cycle lanes, cycle superhighways and mini holiday initiatives to cater for a 1% cycling minority. No, John, no Sits, no whoever coming back at me with a bit of verbal with 3%. Well, they're not 3%. The other 2% of the lobby comes from outside the M25, as far north as Aberdeen. So that's a complete and utter nonsense, garbage, absolute garbage. 1% cycling minority, they've ruined the cityscape and they've ruined London. They've ruined people being able to get from A to B, and they're trying to fix something that wasn't broke. I'm going to come to it, but just bear with me. She's never mentioned once, this Meg Hillier, about the 30 million lost journeys on public transport, right? In inverted commas, ergo buses and tubes. Call it what it is, right? It's not a horse and carriage. It's not a chauffeur-driven Rolls Royce. It's bus and tube. 30 million lost journeys. That's before we get into what Susan Hall said. So you've got £968 million up from an approximate £750 million loss in revenue, right? You with me so far? Because the money spent and money lost is so far is 1.968 billion. Then you've got 2 billion bailout on Crossrail, right? Which is 2 years and 1 month exactly past its completion date. And they're talking about another 400 million, right? Well, it's not going to be. It's going to be another 2 billion, right?
It always is.
But we're given the benefit of the doubt. We just say at the moment it's only 2 billion. So now we're at 3.968 billion. Then you look at the 1.6 billion government bailout. Well, it's not a government bailout. The government ain't got to pot the piss in without the UK taxpayer unless they borrow from the Bank of England or the IMF. So now we're at 5.568 billion. And I've been beating the drum for 2 years, quoting the same figure for 2 years. And this Meg Ilya comes to the thing and she ain't got a clue what she's talking about with regards to TfL's incurred deficit through money wasted, spent, spunked, and or loss of revenue. Coincidentally, they're asking for 5.56 billion, right? So they're at a stage now, they're so nonchalant, they're so arrogant, right, that they've dismissed another the odd 8 million that I've included, right? And then Susan Hall gets in on the act. They've got 120 plus employees on in excess of 100 grand a year. Well, what are they doing? They're getting paid 100 grand a year for fucking Londoner, right? For ruining London. Then, on top of which, because they need the license fees now, they're desperate, you've got an 86% rise in minicab. Right. Well, that brings me nicely to the fact that they're totally contradicting the nonsensical, mythical, non-existent green issue in this country. Never mind London, the green issue, right? Well, why flood the streets with minicabs? And they go, oh, yeah, well, but most of them are hybrids and electric vehicles. Well, if you do your own work, right, a Toyota Prius with its carbon footprint in terms of manufacturing, transportation, has got a bigger carbon footprint than a fucking Mustang 5-litre GT. It's despicable what these people are getting away with, right? But sticking to specifics, right? They're contradicting the green issue. Well, here's the green issue, right? London is responsible for 8% of the UK's total emissions output. That's London. The United Kingdom is responsible for less than 1/5 of 1%. Let me just say it again, less than 1/5 of 1% of the world's emissions. So UK is responsible for 8% of less than 1/5 of 1%. So some American in the back says, have you worked that out? He said, Cabby, if you worked out, I said, no, I could probably work it out with a pen and paper. I said, but it's such a negligible amount, such an insult to my blue collar working class intelligence, I can't be asked. He said, I teach maths, I'm a mathematician. So this is quoting him. So it might be ish, I might be wide of the mark. He says it's 0.004 of a percent. Right? So why is everybody going hysterical? And what more, not only that, right, Joe, listen, what more can we do? We've got electric cabs, right? Which
no, I agree.
It's 67 grand. People go, no, it's 57 grand. Well, it's 57 grand if you got the former 10 grand decommissioning on your old cab. It was then 57 grand. And that's a nonsense because now you've got a situation where drivers can't even get the freehold of their cab to earn a few quid on the back end. Everybody's going to become a renter. So people are going to have to find 200 quid a week, right, before they've even... and then I've got drivers saying, oh, I'll save X amount on diesel. Yeah? Well, it ain't going in your pocket, mate. And I can't convince them. Right? They're saying, oh, I'm saving 1.5 a week on diesel or 125 a week on diesel. Well, it ain't going in your pocket, mate. What it's doing is going towards legislation that we're paying for, and the manufacture of the vehicle and the upkeep of the vehicle and the sale of the vehicle and the premises that the vehicle sold from. It's not going in your bin. It's not going in your pocket. Then at the other end, you've got approximately, everything's ish, right? But I'm not far wide of the mark. You've got something like a 19 grand balloon payment. So no one's going to be a freeholder anymore because they've got no track record over 5 years. So the whole thing is a complete and utter despicable nonsense, penalising someone who's done the equivalent of a PhD. So it makes you think, what are they after? Do they just want everyone to sign on? They just want a benefit-dependent workforce. Is that what they want? Because what it's looking like to me, I'm looking at that thing tonight on the news, and they're talking about the benefit system, right? Well, you've got in a country that's the third, fourth, fifth biggest economy in the world. Why is it? Let me ask you this question. Why is it we've got kids, right, holding out a begging letter for a school meal, right, virtually, and they're talking about the stigma of going to get a free school meal, right, which there shouldn't be. They shouldn't even be in that situation. But then they're talking about people on universal credit. So you know how big the budget is for universal credit? What most of which Uber drivers are reliant on. Do you know how big the budget is?
No.
62 billion. 62 billion a year annually. The universal credits budget, which is bigger than the police budget in this country and bigger than the Ministry of Defence budget. So these people in power, right, they could fuck up a cup of herbal tea, let me tell you, right? And they've been put in charge of all this thing. You've got TfL, a self-appointed Quango, 20 years, right? They've been put, you've got the government in collusion, the previous Tory regime under Cameron and Osborne, who's still copying 13 grand a week retainer from BlackRock, who there's a bit of a whiff coming off the pond here because they've got $500 million coincidentally tied up in Uber. I mean, what's going on here? We're becoming like a third world banana republic.
Okay. So you mentioned there, I'm just going to try and go back on some of those because you made so many good valid points there. But you did an analysis of transportation in London and all the different modes of transportation, how much money they've lost. Right, billions, it's going into the billions. You know, TfLs have to be bailed out. The undergrounds, you know, lose money all the time. Crossrail, whatever.
Well, they don't have to be. They can make a rational decision and disband it.
Yes,
I can make a rational business decision now and disband it. And I'm telling you now, drivers have been screaming out for this, and you'll have less rapes, you'll have less sexual assaults. Listen, it was hard. It was hard. It was very hard, but it was always firm and very fair. Very, very fair.
Did I just say what?
Taxi and private hire, Joe, right, should be put back in the hands of the Metropolitan Police. Yeah. To me, it's a no-brainer. Listen, mate, listen. It's a no-brainer, right? If there's any profit from the licensing, et cetera, of taxi and private hire, right? These are the morons we've got in charge, right? Sadiq Khan has overseen possibly, more than likely, probably the most violent period in London's history. This idiot's answer to save money is let's close half of the remaining police stations. When I did the knowledge, I passed out in 2003. There was 130, maybe 140 police stations, right? Even little section houses. You had to know the section houses, which if people don't know what that is, it was a little gaff that was used for intelligence gathering or to put people up out of town who were working for the plot, right? Section houses, right? And district section houses there was. You had to know them, right? Last port of call, there was 73. So this moron in the most violent period in London's history wants to close half of the remaining 73, already down from 130, 140, right? So that's going to leave us with 36 and a half police stations, to be sarcastic about it, right? Right? So what I'll say is if you stick it all back in the hands of the plod, right? Back in the hands of Nick, and I'm talking from a biased point of view, who's one of my children's a Metropolitan Police officer, right? I'm talking from a slightly biased point of view because they work very long shifts, right? There's a lot of stuff I know that I can't divulge on camera, right? And that I'm told, and that my daughter shares her feelings with me and she shares her opinions and she shares her experiences and her life experiences. Suffice to say, she said, Dad, a lot of what you said come true and it's right. But anyway, be that as it may, I'm saying now, surely it makes sense that if there's an excess, which TfL have quite clearly shown with their 44 million on, I think she said Susan Hall, on parties. 44, they've done 44 million in 20 years on parties. Over 120 employees on in excess of 100 grand a year. Then you've got 640 odd million since COVID, right? Two things very quickly. First thing is, if you put it back in the hands of an organisation that's overseen by the plod, surely it makes sense if there's any excess funds and they continually insist on flooding the streets with minicabs. In the last couple of years, an 86% rise, then, and they're taking their licence fees. What you do, use that money for more police on the street, keeping police stations open, more equipment, better equipment, etc., right? Instead of wasting it on salaries and Christmas parties and fuck knows what, right? There's 600, because I went off at a tangent like I do, because I want to try and cover everything. I want to try and help people understand. I want to try and, not in a patronising way, I'm not talking down to anybody. Please don't take it the wrong way. Educate people, right? With your help. I went off at a tangent slightly. What I'm saying to you, with regards
there is one thing I just want to poke you with on that on that Metropolitan Police point. because, as you say, they were the regulators originally. And if you think about
That's right.
how the hackney carriage trade come about in the 1600s, they didn't want to let people, or the state couldn't allow random people to get into random other people's vehicles, and God knows what was going to happen. So like, it's sort of Jack the
Well,
Ripper style horrendous shit
well,
was going
if
on.
you
No doubt.
listen, if you do your history, if you do your research, which this Meg Ilya couldn't be bothered to do, and get your facts and figures right, another insipid hand ringing, self-righteous, self-entitled, pseudo-intellectual, tree-hugging MP Muppet, right? Christ knows how she's got in. But if you do your, I went back to approximately 1654. Oliver Cromwell used black cabs to keep a lookout on the situation on the streets.
Well, it's funny you say that, because that was my question. So I think in those days, as you mentioned, particularly then, but all the way up until basically the Met Police lost the regulation, the oversight of it.
I know
To
what's
me,
coming.
taxis were the eyes and ears of the community.
Fourth emergency service.
They probably had more of an insight into what was actually going on in real London,
right,
than anybody else. Now, that was
listen. So everyone knows, Joe.
Yeah.
Sorry. Everyone's got to know that this is not rehearsed, because this is eerie. What you're going to ask, or what you're saying, or the vibes I'm picking up. Right, when you're talking about eyes and ears and blah blah blah. We've always been the fourth emergency service. We've always been regarded as the fourth emergency service.
So why is there not an opportunity, going back to the original question, that taxis can actually be a partner may be the wrong word, but a help and a support to the police, to other local authorities?
The police have always used us. Yeah.
But as in,
listen what I'm going to say to you. You know how many police call-outs over the years? It must run into the millions. The police call-outs over the years that we've saved, because what happens is the black cab trade, working alongside the minicab trade, has ferried home and taken off the streets people who might have had a few too many.
Yeah,
and we've taken them home and got them off the street before anything could have evolved.
Even more serious than that, though, John. You've done safeguarding training. You've got issues of domestic abuse, sexual abuse, human trafficking, all that sort of stuff. Could and probably does happen. Probably now through the likes of Uber and minicabs, but certainly traditionally, drug dealing. It can all occur within the black cab.
Yeah.
And you think of you know more than most. The Metropolitan Police, as all police forces have across the country, been decimated. From a budgetary point of view, got less bobbies on the beat.
Yeah.
So you got literally less eyes and ears.
Yeah.
And I wonder
you remember what I said to you earlier about they could fuck up a cup of herbal tea? The officers missing on the beat were part of the cuts made by Boris Johnson when he was mayor. Like now he's saying, between him and Cressida Dick, they're promising, and Khan, they're promising 22,000 new officers. That's more or less down to the last body. Right, that's the same cuts that Boris made. Approximately 20,000 officers when he was actually mayor.
And another thing I just want to add, because I mentioned you did the analysis on the other transport modes that have lost money hand over fist for donkey's years, and I class Uber as part of that, because they've lost billions every quarter since their incarnation. So they're inefficient as well, by the way. They've just got loads of money behind them that keeps them going.
It's a Ponzi
scheme. Yeah. So if you actually look at it in terms of transit modes, transportation modes in the capital, the London cab trade could very well be the only, up until COVID-19, respectfully, the only profitable transport sector in the capital. Over probably since the 1600s.
I've been saying since I passed out, Joe, within 6 weeks, right? Firstly, before I miss it, right? The facts and figures that you've trotted out, the questions you've asked, and the statements you've made. Let's be, to quote this bird who was on yesterday, this Meg, whatever her name is. Let's be clear on this, as they say, right? All COVID has done since March is highlighted what black cab drivers have been saying. I'm going to say it slowly so people understand it. All COVID has done since March has highlighted what black cab drivers have been saying, particularly in London, but my colleagues across the UK as well, for the last 10 years. All it's done is highlighted what we've been saying for the last 10 years with regards to HMRC, benefit system being abused, sexual assaults, rapes, even down to the death of the high street, being able to get around, roads closed off, companies losing money. Someone coming at me, smart ass, the geezer. I ain't even going to tell you his name because I don't want to give him oxygen. I don't want to give him publicity, right? But he was actually sitting in. Someone took a photo of him. He was sitting in on the hearing, the High Court hearing about Uber when they got their 18 months recently, and he's saying, "Oh, like buses have always been subsidised, tubes have always been subsidised, and by the way, it's 40 grand." Well, it ain't. It depends on the bus company. It's between 90 and 130 grand per bus per route per year. All right. So yet again, that's being underpinned by the taxpayer. So the whole thing, it contradicts the nonsensical, mythical green issue, non-existent, nonsensical, mythical green issue, right? By flooding the streets with empty buses on top of the 86% rise in minicabs, right? But on top of that, it's losing money. So my idea would be to streamline it and make it more cost effective that way. But it ain't going to happen because what it is
Well,
people are getting chocolates out of it.
no, the only thing I would say is though it might not happen because we've probably got no influence over the buses and the trains. But
No, but you
have
don't
got
know.
influence
Joe,
over the taxi trade.
Joe, you
There is
don't know.
influence.
Someone might watch this. They might watch this second podcast about the black cab trade and they go, you know what? He's only a blue collar working class oik, right? But he's actually done his research and he's talking a bit of sense.
100%. I'm no doubt. No, I no doubt people will say that. What I guess, just pulling out, I guess the not conclusions, but the key takeaways from what you've said is the taxi trade is safe, efficient, cost effective compared to every other transportation mode in the UK. And I would include private vehicle ownership in that, John, because we all know you buy a car, it's the worst depreciating asset known to man. As soon as you drive over the forecourt, it loses money. Why? Because it's not used efficiently. It's sat outside your house 90% of the time, and you're paying for that through the nose. A taxi is utilised efficiently and effectively. And that's why it's got value. And that's why I know the London cab trade's different, but outside of London, the taxi plates, if there was a finite amount of taxis in a town, that had value. Same as the medallion in New York was trading for $1 million. Now it's trading to next to nothing because the taxi trade has intrinsic value.
Yeah, you can't compare it to New York. My underlying theory, it might be the right theory, it might be the wrong theory, it might be so far wide of the mark, it's unbelievable. I happen to believe the yellow cab in New York, I think that's probably influenced by, let's say, a subculture, an organised crime subculture. Whereas every single cab driver in every single city in the UK, they've earned their badge. They ain't bought the badge, they've earned the badge.
I agree.
Right? What I've been saying since 2003, when I passed out, is too fragmented. We don't stick together. We should have been paying subs instead of for legal protection to the LTDA. We should have been not just invested in our vehicle and in our career. We should have been investing in London. And by now, even when it was 20k, £1 a week, that's £1 million a year. We should have had our own fleet. We should have had our own diesel. We should pumps. We should have had our own hotels, our own hostels, our own restaurants, our own cafes, our own nightclubs, etc., etc. But anyway, it's too big a task to pull it all together. The LTDA have done their thing. I'm a member of everything. You know what I mean? Because I just think like, the more I can put in and the more irons in the fire, then I think the better it is. So
you're stronger together, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm not speaking ill of the LTDA. You know what I mean? I've paid subs in it, but it's just. Well,
it's a big problem.
I'll tell you what I'd like to know. I'd like to know where the money's going for a taxi house. I said there's a reported £20 million canal side in a Desres part of London between Arrow Road and Notting Hill Gate. You know what I mean? So just off of Woodfield Road there. So I'd like to know where the money's gone for that. That'd be interesting, and it might highlight where we are as a trade, because over the next couple of years, I think it's actually going to sort things out, so that we know what's what. What I've always said from day one is, even though we've worked our socks off to earn that coveted green badge, we're on a sticky wicket straight away, because the black cab, Joe, is 3 times the price of a Prius. You know what I mean? So people don't understand that your overheads, I think I mentioned this on the last interview, you probably get, after all your X's are gone, right, and all your overheads are paid for, you probably get somewhere in the region of tariff 1, you probably get 20% of what's on the meter. On tariff 2, you probably get 25% of what's on the meter.
That's
On
your gross
tariff
profit,
3,
isn't it?
on tariff 3, you probably get 35% of what's on the meter. People think you get it all and it all goes in your pocket. They think we drive on magic dust. And the tires last for 35 years, and you don't have to have it serviced or overhauled. And in my case, my road fund license, to give it its posh name, has gone up from 150 quid to 175, and then up and up and up. It's now 550 quid a year.
So, well, yeah, I mean, the costs are exponential. And I think the problem is the costs are becoming even worse costs and harder costs to swallow, because of the traditional mode and market for bookings for the cab trade, which is driving around, people putting their arm out, sitting on ranks, people jumping in outside hotels, outside train stations, street hire. The physical, I call it the physical marketplace, is decimated, and less people are using it. Where are those? And this is where we may disagree, but I'd be interested to know your thoughts. Very last thing, 'cause I know we're talking a while already.
All right, mate.
Is that I believe that the physical market will, and it is already in process, in my opinion, is moving to the virtual market. And I mean apps, I mean technology, and I mean matching drivers en masse with customers en masse. So my question to you is, do you think that embracing technology, and I mean that in its very broadest sense, I don't mean an Uber style app or anything like that, I just mean matching supply, i.e. drivers, with demand, i.e. customers, businesses, NHS, whatever you want, through an online market, will that save the trade or kill the trade?
First of all, I've got to pull you up. The black cab trade has always been at the zenith of technology. Going back 60 years, dial-a cab, Comcab, radio taxis, you could have an account, you could pay by credit card, you could pay monthly, you could do it by phone call, and someone would pull up at your front door. Because I mean, I never got through the probation, but I was on dial-a cab, and someone puts the thing, and then it goes through to a mini computer screen in your cab, and then the closest driver hits the button, then you pull up and you're picking them up outside the door. So listen, let me tell you, staring down at some Apple gizmo is nothing new. It's nothing new, or whatever what I've got, Samsung. It's nothing new. That's the first thing. The second thing is, it's strange, it's funny, it's eerie. The amount of times, and I'm sure loads of drivers, it must be hundreds of drivers, right? The same as me, Joe, right? The amount of times that you're driving with your light on, right? So no answer is the answer. When you're driving with your light on, someone's calling an Uber, or they're calling a black cab via, let's say, Free Now, and you go past with your light on, they'll stick their hand up. Right? Or if it's raining and they've called their Uber, they cancel the Uber and jump in with you. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah,
right?
I do, yeah.
So I think the solution is
it halfway house then? You know, as in,
it is halfway house, and and what I'll do is I'll make it a full house, because if they have me as a consultant or put me in charge of something, my thing would be, you've known me now for a few weeks, and you know that through our interaction on Twitter, etc., or you follow me on Twitter, and you know that I'll probably wear my heart on my sleeve. I'll get too passionate. I'll get too wrapped up. I'll get too involved, and I'll speak my mind. But but I like to think there's a lot of common sense involved, right? Or there's a lot of speak some sense. You know, I might punctuate it with the odd swear word, but that's just like it's either a punctuation mark or an exclamation mark, like it was when I was in football.
Hmm.
Here's the crux of the matter. My views are oversimplistic, and you probably realise that by now. What I would say is, if you want to be a cab driver in London, again, my views are oversimplistic. What you do is you go back to quality assurance. Because listen, make no mistake about it, we've had 3 mayors, and like I put on Twitter, spelling it NIGHT MAYORS instead of MARES, there've been 3 nightmares. The rot started to set in with Livingston when he dumbed down the knowledge for women and ethnic minorities, because he said he wanted more women in the black cab trade. The black cab trade was a white working class mafia. It was a white working class men's club, paraphrase, allegedly, so we don't get fucking nicked. He said he wanted it to reflect the cultural diversity and ethnicity of London. As a consequence of that, at least 20% was slashed off of the subject matter, right? What I would say is we go back to days of yore whereby you could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. You can cater for the non-existent, nonsensical, mythical green issue by reducing the amount of vehicles in London. And the way you do it, you say, if you want to be a cab driver in London, you've got to do the knowledge, right? And then what will happen is they'll be able to sell more cabs. And if they're able to sell more cabs to fleet owners and to private drivers like me, owner drivers like me, a musher, right? To quote the old word, which it was a once Jewish-dominated profession, and I don't even know where the word comes from, but I'm a musher, which is an owner driver, right? They'd sell more cabs, which in turn would bring the price of the cab down, which in turn would bring the fares down, right? But what you do, instead of having 22,000 reduced to 20, reduced to 18, reduced to 16, right? Only as a consequence of COVID, right? But like I said before, as on the proviso that you acknowledge the fact that COVID has just highlighted what we already knew, what was already an ongoing situation, right? But what you do is you say, we'll go back to working side by side, because if you want to be a minicab douchebag and you're between jobs and you're looking for employment as an unemployable, which is basically what they are, and they can't be asked, and they're arrogant and narcissistic, and they rely on benefits, so they become a minicab driver rather than do knowledge. You say, right, these are the rules. You either stick to the rules or you're not playing. So what you do, you slash. It's a no-brainer for me.
Yeah,
what
raising
you do,
the bar. Yeah.
Yeah, you not only raise the bar, you raise the fleet. So let's say, let's pluck a figure out the air. You raise the black cabs in and including suburban drivers to 30,000. So you double the number of minicabs and license holders that are currently somewhere between 16 and 18. So for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to say 15. For the sake of this argument, the sake of making this point, you go, we're going to have 30,000 black cabs in and around London. 40,000, right? But what we're going to do, we're going to reduce the minicab fleet, right, from 111,000-ish, right, down to 40,000. So now, instead of a combined minicab and black cab, 111 and 16 to 18, so let's say 18, 19, let's say 19, right? So you've got combined fleet, right, of 130,000. What you've done, you've slashed it to 80,000 combined, and you've taken 50,000 vehicles immediately off of London's roads.
Yeah, you've raised the standards.
On top of which you've raised the standards, on top of which you've got more qualified black cab drivers paying tax and buying vehicles and renting vehicles, not relying on universal credits. Because I'm telling you now, I'm a gnat's pube away from going on universal credits. And well, that can't be right. I've gone from... So who are these scum in charge, these morons, these retards? Who are these people in charge? Don't edit this out, because that's what they are. They're an insult to my intelligence. They're an insult to everybody else's intelligence. And they're an insult to the office that they're sitting in. Because who are these people whereby they're taking me, who I used to do 10, 11, 12 hours a day, 14, 15 hours at Christmas, right? A black cab driver who's a taxpayer, to being a gnat's pube away from being on universal credits. Where's the fucking sense in this?
No, there is no sense.
No, and it's happened.
It's a scandal.
Joe, it's a scandal. It's happened, and it's happened, right, to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of black cab drivers, not just in London, but also to my colleagues right across the country, the UK. Belfast, Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool, Edinburgh, Glasgow. And there's people think, I love them, the sweaties. I've been up there a few times. I love them, the sweaties. Right, I'll go up there and they know, because I'm like them. I'll wear my heart on my sleeve and I'll talk how I find. I won't, there's no agenda. I'm not
straight down the middle.
Yeah, I'm not thinking like fucking Buster and I've got a flower store outside Waterloo Station. I'm going to have your eyes out. I'll tell you how I see it. And they like that. And they come back at me and they've poured their heart out to me. This can't be right. There's no way this can be right.
No.
Taking people away from being part of a tax-paying workforce to being part of
an eradication. It's an eradication, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, you're and it's like I said earlier. You know, I mean, the more you think, you just think to yourself, what's the point? What's the point? You might as well. What's the point in being a straight goer? What's the point in being a grafter? What's the point in paying your bills on time? What's the point in being a taxpayer? Because the government's literally taking the piss out of what, in my opinion, I've done a chapter on it in my second book, and it might make me a few enemies. But I think since 1947, the government in this country, right, they could have been outclassed, out-negotiated, and outmaneuvered by any self-respecting market trader or black cab driver. You understand? And they've shit from a great eye on the indigenous population, and you're expected to say, thanks for the hat.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, John, you're so impassioned and, you know, I can see it's hurting. And I think you talking from the heart like that, and hopefully people listening in, watching, you know, and obviously that, you know, we want London cab drivers to be listening and watching and we want to hear from them. But also we want other, you know, innocent bystanders, interested parties, other people listening in, because I'm not sure that the voice of the coal face industry, which is what you are and what you represent, maybe it's not being heard. Maybe it's not. Maybe it is being heard. But I think we've got to. It's kind of incumbent upon us to make this as well known and as widespread as possible, because we got to save it, John. We got to try and save it. And I think getting it out there is going to help.
I'm looking to just save me living. I'm just looking to get a living. I'm taking a 50% pay cut over the last 10 years. Because what am I going to do? Work myself into the ground, do 18 hours a day to get somewhere near what I used to take in 9 hours. It ain't going to happen. Because, I mean, what they're looking to do, they're looking to bury me and everybody else. But you've got, the situation is, Joe, what we've got to do. I mean, the crux of the matter for me is quite simple. You've got people with no, they go into office, possibly a privileged background, maybe not. It doesn't matter. But they go from university straight into some back office in Downing Street or number 11 and do the number crunching, do the policy, do the this, do the that. They've never, as you say, been at the coalface. What it means, it needs more, I think, working people, working class people, to try and drum some common sense into them, even if it is put in layman's terms. And I'm talking to you lot, we're having half a lager in a bar, you know what I mean? And I'll come out with the odd fuck, you know what I mean? But no more than these posh morons, you know what I mean?
And I'll swear now, because it's you know,
they're ruining the country.
But your emotion's getting me emotional, and you know, as you know, my old man's a green badge and has been for years, and you know, we've been in the game for a long time, and it is an emotional, is an emotional connection, and what you're saying makes me emotional. And you know what pisses me off is, and I think this needs to be rectified, and needs to be rectified quick, is, and this is a controversial comment maybe, but there has been other industries in the past that maybe haven't been run as efficiently as they should have been run, and maybe they did, you know, maybe the government was correct to look at alternate views, but not mentioning any specifics.
Listen,
but
I might be dead.
Just let me just say this one thing, John, quickly. Just let me say this one thing. The thing is with this, that's one thing. There's one thing eradicating an industry and a trade. That's one thing. And that's happened over the years, right? And there's been some that have been absolutely horrendous. There's been some that are probably right. This one is such a scandal because it's, as you said earlier, the most efficient form of transportation on earth is a taxi. And not only is a taxi the most efficient form of transportation, but the black cab trade in London is the best.
We keep getting voted the best year after 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 year after. You understand? And it's a continuum. We get voted the best in the world in terms of everything from the topographical knowledge of London, the driver knowing his like whereabouts and how to get from A to B. And obviously the shortest route's a straight line, but we get as close to that straight line as we can. The quality assurance. What you find is tying in with what you said. Any industry or profession in this country, I've said it numerous times on Twitter, anything to do with quality assurance in this country, a trade or a profession, we either dumb it down, outsource it, or kill it off completely. And it's up to the people in this country and whatever trade they're in to stop that. And where the black cab trade's concerned, in every city in the UK, what's got to happen is people have got to recognise the fact that a lot of training's gone into it, and the fact that they're all tax-paying, hard-working men and women. And I happen to believe that it's got to be preserved and given back the status that it used to have and that it deserves.
Well, we'll put this out there again, second episode on Twitter, on YouTube, and let's just try and please do message in, comment, DM, whatever you want to do. I'll even put an email address on the actual YouTube post so you can send an email as well. We want to hear from you, and hopefully we can start building a little bit of a movement here and start corralling a trade and start really trying to make a difference. It's a good night from me, and it's a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Nice one.
Cheers,
Thank you very much, guys. All the best.
Ciao, mate.